Welcome to a Tech Moment on Cannabis Tech, where we take just 15 minutes to discuss the science and technology behind the cannabis and hemp industries. I'm your host, Christina Etter. Today we're speaking with Tom DiGiovanni, Chief Financial Officer at Canndescent, about how their facility recently converted to solar power. Let's watch their video summarizing this grand leap into the future of off-grid cannabis cultivation. And after the video, we'll speak to Tom directly about how Canndescent made this happen.
From the start, we knew that we were building facilities that were very energy intensive, and we're worried about our carbon footprint. And we wanted it to be the first to adopt renewable energy on site.
The solar designs are actually very customized. They are designed to withstand 130-mile-an-hour winds. They also are a specific height to allow for fire trucks to go underneath, which is not typical of the normal carport that we would build.
One of the things that we're really proud and excited about with this system is that it offsets as much carbon every year as a 430-acre forest. It reduces 365 tons of atmospheric CO2 every year.
The panels will shade the sides of the building, which will provide an increased efficiency for our operation, plus just a more stable environment inside of the buildings.
This is the first site-specific solar project in the cannabis industry in the United States. For us, that's a big deal. We want to be thought leaders in this industry, and we want to prove that it can be done.
So Tom, tell us a little bit about Canndescent and why you chose to make solar power a priority for your facility.
Sure. So Canndescent has had a number of firsts in California ever since we were founded. And, along with being one of the top cannabis companies, we also want to be a thought leader for the industry. So over the past few years, we had the first municipally permitted grow facility in the state of California. We were the first cannabis company in California to get fully compliant banking. And, we've had a number of other firsts. We were the first cultivator to abandon strain names and market by effect. And, so that all of these things kind of led to the number one flower brand in California. But on the other side of the, just kind of the operating facets of the business, we know that because we grow indoors, these facilities are fairly power intensive. And we wanted to offset how much power we use from the grid. And so, from the outset, the time that we put the facility together and opened it, we were looking for an alternative energy solution. And it took a while to get it done, but we wanted to be the first one in the country actually to do site-specific solar.
Fantastic. No, it sounds like a great project. Now, I understand it took a little time maybe to get all the financing in line to get the project done. So can you tell us a little bit about what that process looked like? And then what were some of those other challenges of going to a full solar?
Yeah, the biggest challenge that we had, quite honestly, was getting the financing done. And I think anybody who's in the cannabis industry can relate to this. I worked in the solar industry for 3.5 years before I came into cannabis, and I worked for some of the leading names in solar, one of whom was REC Solar on the commercial side, and I also worked for Sunrun, which is the leading residential solar company. So I know quite a bit about solar financing, and in most industries, it's relatively easy to find project financing. And typically that's what you see, rather than take your working capital and allocate it to an asset that's going to be around for 25 years. You go out and you find funding for the project. You line up the funding, and then you move on to permits and construction. That's not the case in cannabis because bank financing and kind of traditional sources of financing are mostly closed off to cannabis companies.
Right.
So as we were going through this project, it looked like we had something put together using the PACE program. PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And essentially the way that works is you borrow against the underlying property, and you wind up paying for the payments on the loan through your property tax bills. And so that's a fairly common way to fund these projects. It looked like we had PACE financing lined up at the end of 2017, early 2018, and then Jeff Sessions pulled the Cole memo. And as soon as the Cole memo went away, our PACE funding provider called. I mean, literally it was the next day, and they said their investors got cold feet about the industry and were no longer interested in funding our project. So we were back to the drawing board at that point. So it took another 6 months to find a funding source. And ultimately what we wound up doing was we did a completely non-cannabis loan on the underlying property. And then to get that loan done, we wound up having to wrap that with another loan that included a corporate guarantee. And then we had the funding put together, but it was a really creative way to get this project funded. I'm hopeful that PACE financing will come back now that, the Jeff Sessions is gone, and the perceived risk in the industry might be a little bit lower than it was at the beginning of last year.
Right.
So if PACE funding comes back for the industry, then that will be an avenue that a lot of people can use. I know from my time in the solar industry that PACE projects, particularly in California, the loss rate for lenders using PACE is about 0.3%. So, these things are really, really secured loans that people don't walk away from. So I hope that comes back, because I'd like to see a lot of other cannabis companies go solar.
Right. Now, I just watched your video regarding the solar project, and I think you kind of mentioned in there some statistics. The cannabis industry is using about 1% of the energy grid right now, which is huge when you take that into perspective. And so it's really interesting to hear all the different ways that going to a full solar array is going to benefit your energy efficiency. So tell us a little bit about how the solar is actually paying off for you, and what are some of the benefits that you've seen?
Sure. And by the way, some of the estimates that I've seen show that in different parts of the country, the cannabis industry is using as much as 4% of all the energy coming off the grid, which is that is a huge number. For us, now you have to remember, we were limited by the specific footprint of the site that we put this project on. But we're expecting that our peak energy use will drop by 50%, and we're actually seeing a little bit more than that. I've seen some of the early statistics coming out of the system, and our peak energy use is down by about 54%. And in California, they bill you two different ways. You get billed by the amount of peak power that you use, so there's kind of a bill override for that. And then, of course, you get billed for the amount of power that you use as well. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing is the system is offsetting about a ton of carbon every day. It's producing lots and lots of power and offsetting about 50% of our peak load, which is fantastic. We would have gone to 100% if we could have. Again, we were limited by the size of the site. And in addition to that, it's providing shade to the buildings, which actually cools the building envelope. So our HVAC loads are going down. And we've shaded the HVAC units themselves, so they're running more efficiently. So we haven't seen a full month yet. We haven't seen the bill because the system's only been in place for a month. But I'm expecting a pretty significant drop in our bills and our overall power usage, which is great. We're also looking at things like LED lighting and doing some other things inside the facility, because we're essentially trying to get our grid usage down by 100% if we can.
Wow. That's very, very impressive. So what's on the horizon? What's in the future for Canndescent? Do you have any more sustainability tricks up your sleeve?
Sure. In this particular site, or on this site, this was our first municipally permitted site. We have two other sites in Desert Hot Springs, which is just outside Palm Springs, that we're growing in. Well, actually, one of them is a greenhouse. So think about, kind of 4 walls with a clear roof. You can use the sun. We've got supplemental lighting in that. And then we have another facility that's fully indoor that's coming online later this year. We're looking at putting solar panels on the indoor facility, basically right after it opens. We're also working with Southern California Edison right now. They've asked us to do some research and development on LED lights. And there's a potential funding process that they're going to provide us some R&D funds to take a couple of our grow rooms, convert them to LED, and see what kind of yields from a harvest perspective that we get out of the LED lights. And, our growers in particular have been a little bit resistant to using LED lights for the flower rooms, because they feel like the lighting spectrum coming out of LED isn't quite as intense as what you see in the old style lights, the high pressure sodium lamps. Mm-hmm. So they've been a little bit resistant because they don't want to see lower crop yields. But with Southern California Edison's help, we're going to look at that. And then we're also doing a number of other things. We're a hydroponic grower, so we use very little water. But by managing our electric use over the course of a 24-hour day. It will lower our peak loads and, basically lower our overall demand from the grid, which is good. We're also fortunate, by the way, that our facilities are close to Palm Springs. And if you've ever been in the Palm Springs area, there's too many windmills to count. So when you look at the overall energy usage from that area, almost 100% of it is covered by the power that all the windmills down there are generating. So, we started off in a really good place.
Right.
And then we added solar to our first facility on top of that, which that makes us feel really good about what we're doing to protect the environment.
Well, I think it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, we've always been kind of proud of the cannabis industry of being the green industry, but to see us actually taking environmentally green movements to help, take some of that load off of our resources is absolutely the right direction, I think. And it's really nice to see Canndescent taking a step forward and doing that. So absolutely fantastic.
For me, especially coming out of the solar industry, it's been, on one hand, a labor of love, and on the other hand, it's been kind of an effort through sheer force of will. We made this happen, and it's one of those things that it's been relatively frustrating because it should have been a lot easier to get this project done. And I really hope that Congress passes the Safe Banking Act or opens a path to banking, because that will also open a path to project finance. And you'll see a lot of other cannabis companies start to do this, because I know we're not the only company having this conversation. And of course, it helps when you're lowering your operating expenses. But we also, obviously, we live in the environment too, and we're super mindful of that. And we want to be a good steward of the environment.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Tom. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you would like to tell the rest of our audience about your solar project before we sign out?
I think the one thing I'd like to tell everybody is if they have any questions about, further questions about how we got this done, or if, they just want some advice on potentially financing a project wherever they are, I'd encourage them to reach out to either myself or someone at Canndescent. We love talking about the project, and we'd love to, kind of help out anybody who's in the industry and help them, kind of get to their goals as far as renewables.